It's Thursday, the 19th of August 2021. Welcome to Fear and Greed, the business podcast that sets you up for a successful day. I'm Sean Aylmer. Qantas has mandated a no jab, no work policy for all its staff, setting the scene for other big businesses to follow. That's our main story. Also coming up in today's podcast, New South Wales records its highest ever level of COVID cases. Wage rises slow as the heat comes out of the employment market. And there's a slew of earnings results from CSL and Coles through to Domino's and Super Retail Group. Then, stay listening for my chat to former boss of 10 Network, Paul Anderson, about his new studios in Byron Bay. But first, here's a brief look at markets. Wall Street was lower overnight after the release of Federal Reserve Board minutes. They showed that the central bank will likely pull back their pace of monthly bond purchases before the end of the year. The S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average were both 0.4% lower in afternoon trading, while the Nasdaq was down 0.3%. European markets were mixed, with London's FTSE 0.2% lower, while the Stoxx Europe 600 was slightly higher. The S&P ASX 200 fell slightly yesterday to finish at 7,503 points. BHP's share price tumbled, more of that in a moment. Rio Tinto was down more than 2%, while Wesfarmers was off 1%. The banks were broadly stronger, while REA was more than 3% higher. Beach Energy share price and Domain Holdings both jumped more than 6% after recent profit announcements, and on the other side of the ledger, Sims Metal lost ground, down 5.5%, and Netwealth fell nearly 5%. Oil prices were lower again overnight. That's 5 sessions running, where Brent crude has fallen, and it's trading a bit above $68 a barrel. The price of gold was a touch higher, and the Aussie dollar is fetching about 72.5 US cents. Qantas has introduced a no jab, no work policy for its tens of thousands of staff, including those on the ground, opening the way for other corporates to mandate vaccinations. The decision, which risks a trip to the Fair Work Commission, was announced by Chief Executive Alan Joyce, who said anyone not getting a jab was making a conscious decision to not be in the aviation sector. It came on a red-letter day for New South Wales, with 633 new COVID cases announced, notwithstanding the state has been in lockdown for 8 weeks. Qantas's decision came after surveying 12,000 staff and follows moves by manufacturer SPC to make jabs for employees compulsory. Qantas and Jetstar cabin crew, pilots and airport workers must be fully vaccinated by November 15, and all other employees by the end of March next year. The airline will consider medical exemptions in very rare cases, but Mr. Joyce said the business was an essential service, and he had an obligation and duty of care to make it as safe as possible. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, welcomed the announcement, congratulating Qantas on the process it took before making the decision. Lawyers said it was very possible that an employee will go to the Fair Work Commission claiming unfair dismissal if they object to the vaccine. Unions said they did not support the initiative and were not consulted. Mr. Joyce also said he was considering vaccine passports for domestic travellers as well as international travellers. While I think I support Mr. Joyce's position, and the Qantas CEO has constantly shown he's willing to make very tough calls, there's just a little bit of me nagging away around free choice. I think everyone should get vaccinated, but I also think it should be an individual's choice. Maybe something as severe as coronavirus makes it okay to mandate a jab. Nearly 50% of Australia's eligible population have now had one jab, and 27.5% are fully vaccinated. What will be interesting is whether other big businesses follow the lead of Qantas. In a moment, the rest of the news you need to know this morning. In overseas news, Chinese President Xi Jinping provided an outline for common prosperity in the world's second largest economy yesterday, including income regulation and a redistribution of wealth. In a speech sure to scare rich Chinese, Mr. Xi outlined new strategies to target the upper echelons of society and reasonably adjust excessive income. The richest 20% of Chinese earn more than 10 times the poorest 20%. The Biden administration plans to offer a third dose of some vaccines to Americans from next month, as a number of new cases of the Delta variant of COVID-19 continues to rise. The booster shots would be provided 8 months after the second jab. And the good money was on the Reserve Bank of New Zealand being the first central bank in a developed economy to lift interest rates. But yesterday it didn't move on monetary policy. Instead, the central bank focused on how disruptive and unpredictable COVID-19 was, highlighting the reintroduction of restrictions in New Zealand on Tuesday. The country has now recorded 10 new COVID cases in the past 48 hours. Locally, as mentioned in the main story, New South Wales recorded 633 new COVID cases and 3 more deaths yesterday, with concerns the numbers will rise in coming days because of the number of people in the community or mixing within households while infectious. It's easily the worst day on record for the state. Victoria recorded 24 new local cases and the ACT recorded 22. The good news was the likelihood that the Northern Territory will lift its lockdown this afternoon and no new cases in any other state. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Scott Morrison yesterday said advice about vaccinating 12 to 15-year-olds using the Pfizer jab was not too far away. Work is underway to introduce a school-based vaccination program, he said. The PM was also optimistic about the economic outlook, saying once the country reaches vaccination rates of 70 to 80%, the economy will bounce back strongly. Australia's first flight out of Kabul left early yesterday morning, and on board were 26 Australians. It's the first of several flights, and the PM said key personnel from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Defence were in the country to help facilitate the evacuation of citizens, residents and visa holders, and a few Afghan nationals from Kabul. The evacuees are heading to the United Arab Emirates for processing before returning to Australia. Meanwhile, the US sent 1,000 more troops to Kabul in an attempt to regain control over the airport. Wages growth was 0.4% in the June quarter, taking annual growth to a very benign 1.7%. Last time wages growth was this week was during the global financial crisis. Wages are the critical ingredient to inflation, which the Reserve Bank wants to hit 2 to 3% before it moves on interest rates. International border closures resulted in some increases in wages, according to the Bureau of Statistics, though this amounted to just small pockets of wage pressure in relation to particular skill requirements. Wages growth in the arts and administration areas was the weakest over the last year, whereas professional services and construction saw the biggest increases. Coles boss Stephen Kane said the supermarket giant was preparing for disrupted sales during the current half year and a return to normal in early 2022. The group announced a 3% increase in its bottom line for the 12 months to the end of June, doing better than analysts expected. Mr. Kane said the metro stores, some shopping centre stores and CBD stores were under trading, whereas neighbourhood shops and e-commerce were doing much better. Liquor sales were higher. It reflects the lockdown world we live in. Coles share price was flat yesterday. CSL expects this financial year to be one of transition, and profit and revenue could fall as a result of lower plasma inventories. CSL posted a 12% jump in sales and net profit last financial year at the top of expectations. The problem for the group is that lockdowns make it more difficult to collect blood plasma. CSL boss Paul Perreault, who has been running the company from Utah for 18 months because of COVID, said he was happy with the outcome given the challenges. He also said governments should stop aiming for zero COVID cases because it won't happen. CSL's share price closed down 1.5% yesterday. The West Australian Royal Commission into Crown Resorts continues and provides some interesting tales. The former manager of Gaming and Regulatory Compliance, Paul Holm, described an incident where junket guests walked out of a high roller room at the casino, leaving behind gambling chips worth millions of dollars. He said it didn't strike him as an indication of money laundering or other illegal activity, according to a report in the Financial Review. He just thought it was a stupid act by junket guests. And last night, The Australian reported that James Packer will almost certainly be forced to sell down his 37% stake in the gaming giant if it wants to operate in New South Wales, after the state government agreed to support the regulatory recommendations of the Bergen inquiry, one of which suggested a 10% shareholder cap on casino operations in New South Wales. 24 hours after doing a deal to merge BHP's oil and gas business, Woodside reported a $448 million core profit for the 6 months to June. The result was lower than expected, and Woodside's share price fell more than 2% after the announcement. CEO Meg O'Neill said revenues were helped by higher prices due to the recovery in demand for both oil and LNG. There had been some disruption to production during the period due to bad weather and operational issues. Investors are now more focused on whether they should give the go-ahead to the mega merger with BHP. For their part, BHP shareholders seem less enamoured with the idea and the rest of the changes announced on Tuesday night by the big Australian. BHP's share price fell 7% yesterday, worth almost $11 billion. Lockdowns are good for pizza sellers. Domino's Pizza Enterprises lifted its final dividend by more than 60% and delivered a 29% jump in net profit last financial year. The result was underpinned by a record number of new store openings as well as strong same-store sales growth. Domino's opened 285 new stores around the globe last financial year, mostly in Europe and Japan, which is where its future lies. CEO Don Meij was upbeat about the group's prospects, saying he expected to open between 9 and 12% more stores each year. Investors liked the commentary, and Domino's share price closed up more than 7% yesterday to a new record. What else do people like doing during lockdowns and restrictions? Buy lottery tickets. Tabcorp released its full-year results yesterday, and as has been the case for a while now, the lotteries business did well, and the wagering business disappointed. Profit from the lotteries group, which includes Powerball, Oz Lotto and Saturday Lotto, hit record levels. The wagering division was harmed by lockdowns as TABs closed around the country. At least earnings picked up. The two businesses are demerging early next year, and Tab's share price finished 0.8% lower yesterday. There's been plenty of movement in the Buy Now Pay Later group Sezzle's share price. On Tuesday, it fell nearly 15% and then another 5% yesterday. Sezzle reported that its provision for bad debts jumped sharply to nearly 50% of revenue for the June quarter. One of the ongoing queries about the Buy Now Pay Later sector is whether it will end up with a bunch of bad debts. The major players have said no, but clearly Sezzle is running into that problem. Super Retail Group, which includes Supercheap Auto, Rebel, BCF and Macpac, said sales across its four main retailers jumped 22% last financial year, though things have come off the boil in the past couple of months due to lockdowns. Chief Executive Anthony Herity said he feared COVID-19 volatility would last for years. Its share price dropped more than 1% yesterday. Up next is the Daily Interview, and today we're talking to Paul Anderson, the former CEO of Channel 10. He now runs a film studio based out of Byron Bay in northern New South Wales, so he has a front row seat to one of the most interesting, exciting and more resilient industries in the country. It's a terrific chat about film, television and how the sector is coping with the pandemic. That's up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. It's Thursday, the 19th of August, 2021. I'm Sean Aylmer, and that was Fear and Greed. Enjoy your day.